Hello again, everybody. I'm Richard Tripp, and welcome to another edition of Tripp's Corner here on Proview Networks. Today, we find out about Ron Murphy. How did Ron Murphy go from Brooklyn, New York, to being the head coach at Rio Rancho High School? Coming up on Tripp's Corner.
Sadie's is a proud supporter of New Mexico high school sports and athletics, and we here at Proview Networks would like to thank Sadie's for their continued support in helping us bring you all of your New Mexico high school sports coverage.
Coach Murphy, welcome to Tripp's Corner here on Proview Networks. Thank you for being our guest. You know, I've been anxiously awaiting to do this show because we'll get to it later on. I want to find out how Ron Murphy got from Brooklyn, New York to Albuquerque, New Mexico, or even, shall we say, Edgewood, but we'll cover that in a moment. But where I want to start, Coach, is this. You know, we always like to start the show with telling us a little bit about your hometown, where you grew up. We want to hear about those humble beginnings, you know, all the way back in Brooklyn, New York, or in Selden, New York, if you will. Tell us a bit about it. What was it like growing up back then?
It was fun. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, Bleeker Street and Irvin Avenue. And we had a lot of relatives within 3 or 4 blocks, I would say 50 or 60 of them. So we were a very tight-knit family, uncles, aunts, cousins, and, you know, we did a lot of playing in the street. There wasn't no sitting in the house. Never heard of a video game in my life. Everything we did it together. Whether a stickball in the street was quite a fun game, you know. And then if something happened where you broke a window, you just ran to the next block and continued the game. And you know, eventually, you know, you never run out of blocks in Brooklyn, so the game always went on. But growing up in New York was awesome. I had my grandparents close by. I spent a lot of time with them. My family's a very close family unit, and you know, even the extended family is very close, and so we did some great things back there. Got to be a Met fan growing up in Brooklyn. My dad was a big Brooklyn Dodger fan, and all my uncles and relatives, and they hated the New York Yankees. So obviously when the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, the first thing my family did was hate the LA Dodgers, and then the second thing they did was became New York Met fans when the Mets came on board, and so that's what led me to become a New York Mets fan. So I lived in Brooklyn until about 9 or 10 years old, and my dad and my mom just wanted something better for us kids. They thought Long Island, New York had more grass, opportunity to play sports, athletics, and so we were one of the first family members to buy a house out there in Selden, New York, Long Island, exit 62 on the Long Island Expressway. That's kind of how we landmark everything in New York by where you live on the Long Island Expressway. So we're exit 62, and it wasn't long after that all the uncles and aunts and cousins started moving out to Selden and Center Reach, and we were all out there. And it was great. I loved it out there. It was a lot more grass, played a lot of sports. I played everything growing up. Baseball, football, basketball, hockey was big, played a lot of hockey. You know, I got to go to Newfield High School in Selden, New York, and I really feel like, you know, with the coaches I had at Newfield High School, and Mr. Perna, DeMartini, DeRosa, Mr. Delegati, I mean, Bob DeRosa, and I know I'm forgetting one, Mr. Angelino. I had coaches there that were just so mentors to me. They really, you know, especially Mr. Perna was not only a coach, he was a teacher for me, and they taught me what it was like to respect, to work hard, to never be satisfied with just being average and just pushing yourself. And I still talk to those coaches today on Facebook. It's amazing, but they're still around. And you know, after I get a big win or something happens, you know, I post something on Facebook. They're the first ones to like it and say something. And I can't even tell you how thrilled I am every time they respond on there, because I still consider them my mentors. And you know, without them, I probably wouldn't be very successful in life with having that kind of mentorship. So I always appreciate my high school coaches at Newfield High School and all the things they've done for me.
You know, I kind of did some research on Newfield High School and found I like to look at notable athletes. I mean, the school, I mean, God, Rob Burnett, who was a member of the 2000 Super Bowl champion Ravens, Linda Cohn from ESPN, and Ron Murphy from Newfield High School. Not a bad alumnus honor roll, if you ask me.
No, those first two were awesome. That third guy, you know, he could go either way. But I tell you what that third guy was at Newfield High School. He was a loyal student, not a great student, but loyal. I went to school every day. but he was a great teammate. You know, I was a definition of being a role player. I did the little things on every team I played for to help my teammates, hopefully to become better. But we had some great athletes in Newfield High School, the Mike Maloney's, the James Burks, Speedo Abruzos. Those guys were just unbelievable. And I was so excited to be part of the team with them, playing in all the sports that I played. And, you know, I love Newfield High School. You know, I go back quite a bit. I'm part of their booster club a little bit, and I really appreciate just being part of it. This Friday night, I'm going to New York, and you know, the first thing I'm doing on Friday is going to a Newfield football game, so I'm excited.
You know, I want to take you back with your father. You know, I read on Facebook, you know, and I know the closeness you had with your father, you know, an Army vet. So tell us, Coach Murph, what did your father mean to you, and what did you learn from your father growing up?
My dad taught me a lot. My dad was a United States Marine, and he's right now buried in the Santa Fe National Cemetery. And, you know, I had awesome parents. I'm the oldest of 8. I got 4 brothers and 3 sisters. And, you know, my dad being a U.S. Marine in the Korean War, the thing he taught me more than anything else was discipline. Discipline and hard work. There was no handouts in our family. I used to tell everybody, we never once, I don't think, ever went on a family vacation. We never went to Disneyland. We never went to a theme park together. We didn't have a car that could fit, you know, 9, 10 people. But we had a barbecue at the house every weekend, and all the cousins and uncles and aunts came over. And I always said, a barbecue with my family in the backyard beats Disneyland any day. So my dad taught me about loyalty, family, working hard, helping each other out. And, you know, he's my hero. You know, we always talk about famous people that are your mentors, but my dad is the biggest one in my life.
You know, tell us about your mom as well.
My mom, you know, 8 kids in the family. She never, you know, she didn't have to work. I mean, she couldn't work. She did laundry. She did food. She was a hard worker. Very loving. Just passed away last year. One of the hardest things to do was to come, you know, try to make it back to New Mexico before she passed away, and I was able to do that. But I don't know how she survived with 8 kids in the house. And with me as the oldest, you know, it probably got a lot easier after I left. And but God bless my mom and my dad. You know, their marriage was awesome. The way they raised all the kids, all my brothers and sisters are doing well. They're all successful, and every one of us are close with each other, and we all loved our mom and dad very much.
You know, just last question here on segment 1. You talked about the sports you played growing up. Which one did you know then it was going to be baseball, or which one at the time were you most interested in?
You know what? I was probably the best at baseball than any other sport. Baseball came natural to me, and I was highly recruited by the club teams and those type of things in New York. But I think I enjoyed football more. I don't know, it was a way for me to release that energy I had and to go out and hit people and get hit and release that energy. And my friends all seemed to be football players. And my lifelong friends, even till today, from Newfield High School, are guys that I have played football together. Something about bleeding and sweating on that same field that had created a lifetime memory. I was better at baseball than any other sport. I was pretty decent at hockey, not as good as my brothers were, but football seemed to be the passion I had in high school that really, I think, led me to want to coach.
That's going to do it for segment 1 here on Tripp's Corner. We're with Ron Murphy, head baseball coach at Rio Rancho. When we come back, segment 2. So how does Ron Murphy get from Brooklyn, New York to Edgewood, New Mexico? Coming up on Tripp's Corner.
Get into the game with Garden Swartz Team Sales. They have everything you need, from screen printing, embroidery, and digital printing services, high school letterman jackets, and all high school and club uniforms, and individual and team apparel with the most reliable brands like Speedline, Rollins, and Wilson. And don't forget to check out the latest F7 Shut helmet. It's all at Garden Swartz Team Sales. Give them a call, 505-884-1234. Garden Swartz Team Sales.
Proview Network crew, assemble! good. We're first.
High school sports are back live on Proview Sports Network.
Wondering if you can afford the ring of her dreams? At Crown Jewels and Coin, we actually double the diamond for what you would pay at a chain store. Trade in your old jewelry towards GIA certified diamonds. Choose from a large selection of settings featuring Viraggio. We can customize a design and offer no credit check 2-year interest-free financing. Get more than you ever thought possible here at Albuquerque's family jeweler for over 50 years. Crown Jewels and Coin, for all you treasure. 3248 San Mateo at Kruger's Corner.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Tripp's Corner. We're with Ron Murphy, the head coach at Rio Rancho High School. Here's the question that I have been longing to ask. How does Ron Murphy get from Selden, New York to New Mexico? And of all places, Edgewood, New Mexico. How did all that happen?
I have no idea. I've been wondering the same thing. I was hoping you'd give me that answer. You know what? My dad, I have an aunt back then that lived in Edgewood. She lived in a trailer home. The only relative I had in New Mexico. And my dad came out here. My dad's dream thing was to be a cowboy. He just wanted to be a cowboy. He didn't know how to do it, but he wanted to be one. So he came out to New Mexico for a few months and lived with my aunt and was looking for a job, and things didn't pan out and he had to come back to New York. He left his car here. And the one thing my dad wanted from me, he didn't want me growing up in New York and doing the same old thing. And, you know, hanging out with the same guys on the same street corner. And so he was very insistent that, one, he wanted me to go to college. Nobody in my whole entire family at that time, history of my family, had ever gone to college. So that was a big deal to him, and he insisted I was going to go to college. And I wanted to. And he also insisted I was going to leave home. I was going to, you know, become a young man somewhere, or I was going to fail, one or the other. But he figured I had to go move on my own. And somewhere I couldn't come home for the weekend and hang out with the guys and the family. And as much as, you know, he knew I would miss the family, he knew as a young man I would have to mature. So New Mexico was a place he really wanted me to go. And then at some summer league games, I had met this guy called Vince Capelli.
Vince Capelli.
Vince
okay.
Capelli, who was from New York, head baseball coach at the University of New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
He explained to me about the University of New Mexico and coming out here and possibly playing. At the time in New York, I didn't think I was a great player. I thought I was a really good role player. And I had some interest from the Cincinnati Reds, and I was invited to some tryout camps and workouts with them. And I was very excited to do that. And I even got invited to go to spring training workouts for them in Florida. But couldn't afford my own way to Florida, and that's what it was going to take back then. And decided that college was going to be it. And so my dad said, well, if you go to New Mexico, you could have the car. And you live with your aunt, and we'll drive you out there and see what it's like. And I said, okay. We got in the car after my last summer league game, after I graduated from Newfield High School, 17 years old, never left New York in my life, not even New Jersey, Philadelphia, never left. We got in the car, we started driving to New Mexico, and right away he started saying, you know, keep your head down, make sure there's no bow and arrows coming and stuff. And me and my brother were scared as anything in the car, not knowing where we were going. Thought we needed a passport. I didn't know, you know, you hear the word Mexico. You know, we just didn't know. Wasn't very educated about anything else but New York. Got to Edgewood, New Mexico, because my aunt lived there. Got the car. The car didn't run. It was all dented. It was beat up. But I had a barn. I lived in a barn. My aunt had a son that lived there that had a barn. A donkey lived in there named Taco with some birds and hens and who knows what else. And they had horses. So I went from New York to a barn in Edgewood. And I was scared. I remember the first time I rode a horse out there. They had 45 acres, and I was riding a horse bareback, holding on for dear life. And the horse stopped, and we're right over probably a 12-inch little snake. At the time, I didn't know it was a garden snake, and it was harmless. But I was screaming and kicking and yelling, and my uncle come running out, and I was terrified. But I lived in a barn. The donkey would kick the door down 3 o'clock in the morning, wanting candy. I'd give it candy, go back to bed, get up at 6 a.m., drive to UNM, you know, once school started. And I was very grateful when the dorms opened up and I got to move on campus. So that's kind of what brought me there. My dad, as usual, my dad kind of led me to that life.
You know, now you're here in Edgewood, of course, talk about culture shock, if you will. Albuquerque, even back then, wasn't as big as it is today. There was really no Rio Rancho. So, Coach, here you are in Edgewood, New Mexico. You're going to the University of New Mexico. Your father gives you a car under the condition that you attend college. But the car itself, let's just say, had some issues, if you will. So tell us what it was like to commute from Edgewood to Albuquerque every day.
It was crazy. I had a cousin out there that had to drive into town also, and the car had no window, and it got cold some mornings, and we would try to drive and stay away from that window, and it was an experience. But I mean, it was. I never looked at it as a bad thing. I mean, you know, my dad just always taught us that whatever the situation was, you make the best of it, and you don't complain, you don't whine, you deal with it, and so that's what we did. I really never realized, you know, that it was a bad situation to maybe years later, but. It was okay. I was fine with it.
You know, you're playing for Vince Capelli. Wow. You know, I don't know at that time what you were thinking, but around here in New Mexico, that was, as I said, wow, the ultimate almost. That was almost as good as playing for the Dukes, if you will. What was it like playing for Vince?
Well, really, you know, unfortunately, I really didn't get to play for Vince that much. What had happened was I came here, I was in the off-season program, and it wasn't long before I got hurt in the off-season in the fall. I had messed up my knee, and my knee was in culture shock, and I tried to rehab it, went to the doctors, and it just never got good again. So, you know, I had some teammates like Walt Siegel that played with the Lobos, Walt Arnold, who was a stud back then.
Yes.
We got to take a gymnastics class with Rusty Mitchell together, and Walt was on the baseball team. But I was out there in the fall working out and everything else, and it just wasn't a go with my knee anymore. So realized when baseball season got there that the Lobos baseball was not going to happen for me. Coach Capelli offered me to stay out there and try to work through it and everything else. But at that time, you know, being the oldest of 8, I needed to work. I needed to make money. My parents couldn't afford college, and you know, baseball wasn't going to be an option anymore, and that was okay. But I got 3 jobs at UNM and worked all the time at the YMCA, the Student Union building, made my money, and it turned out okay.
Sort of like the caretaker of the family, if you will, you know, having to provide, I guess, for your family at a young age. How old were you then?
I was 17 when I came to UNM, and it wasn't so much that I had to provide. My providing for my family was being a big brother to my 4 brothers and 3 sisters. My dad insisted on that. They were not allowed to get in trouble, or else I'd be in trouble. So I really never had to caretake for my family as far as money goes. It was just that they knew that I would have to take care of myself when I was out here. So I made sure that I wasn't going to be a financial burden on my family. And so that's why I got the 3 jobs and all that kind of stuff.
Man, talking about having to grow up in a hurry, you had to do it in a hurry.
Had to do it in a hurry, and it never seemed like it was a burden, to be honest.
Great. Well, Coach, we have one segment to go. When we come back for our last segment, we're going to find out how Ron Murphy, okay, he's not UNM. Things didn't quite develop the way we wanted, or he wanted maybe, to be a baseball player for the Lobos. But how did he land up here at Rio Rancho High School, where he's now the head coach and a very successful head coach? We'll find out when we come back on Tripp's Corner.
TurboThreads is a proud sponsor of Proview Networks.
Almost 30 years of experience means fast service, great prices, and a wide selection of apparel from t-shirts to performance sport shirts, even jackets and hats. They feature low minimums and no setup charges on most orders. TurboThreads is located at 1503 Golf Course Road in Rio Rancho, or find them on Facebook, online at turbothreads.com, or call 999-1234 for TurboThreads.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number 1. Cover it with green stuff, 1 scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
For 55 years, people have bought trucks from Tillery in Los Lunas. We have a great selection of vehicles, the quality service department, and some of the best deals in the state. But most importantly, we found people prefer to buy trucks from people who actually drive trucks.
Tillery is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network. Locally owned and operated, located in Las Lunas, right off I-25, exit 203.
Welcome back to segment 3 here on Tripp's Corner, and we're with Rio Rancho head baseball coach Ron Murphy. And Coach, you've taken us from your humble beginnings in Selden, New York, to your transition here in New Mexico, to the University of New Mexico. But take us now, if you will, kind of have a timeline, if you will. You leave the University of New Mexico, now you're going to start getting involved in coaching. How did you get involved in coaching?
Well, what had happened, one of my jobs when I got to the University of New Mexico, when I needed to work, was at the YMCA. And so I wound up landing their before-school program, after-school program, but I was also in charge of all their sports. And I had to run the program director for the sports at the Mountainside YMCA over on Comanche and Tramway. So I was doing what I loved. I was involved with sports. I was running summer camps and I was with kids. I love kids. I've always been around kids. I'm the oldest of 8. Kind of trained me to be a coach, dealing with my brothers and sisters. But at UNM, I was never a very good student in high school. I just did enough to get by. And same thing at UNM the first couple of years. But then again, you run into a coach or teacher or mentor, and Dr. Gary Ness was one of my teachers. And I remember him pulling me into the office and sitting me down and just kind of telling me, what do you want to do with yourself? Where are you going with this? And him and Dr. Gustafson, Dr. G, they used to call him, they were mentors to me at UNM, and it just felt good that somebody cared for me. That about my future and everything else, and being a long way from home, it was really important to find mentors like that. And so I decided then, well, first thing I wanted to do was be a PE teacher, and I really wanted to work with kids with that. And so I was able to get a special ed stipend to get a teaching job because there was no PE job open.
Right.
Sandia High School opened me on a stipend. And I was there with Steve Galley, a football coach, as his educational assistant at first to learn the system. And while there, they had a football opening for a freshman team. So I went to meet with the legendary Jim Ottman and interview for the football job. And Coach Ottman hired me. So my first ever coaching job in my life was freshman football at Sandia High School. Coaching kids like Mark Hilton, Al Foster was part of the Sandia High School, Brendan Donnelly. Great athletes at Sandia High School. So I got hired for freshman football there. That led me to do JV baseball with Coach Paskowitz. I did girls JV basketball with Coach Beard. And so 1985, freshman football, and then did all those sports there. And that's how it all started at Sandia High School, down to Coach Jim Ottman.
And Coach Ottman, of course, one of the legends of New Mexico, I guess we can say. I believe he is in the Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure he is. From there, you kind of transition over to Highland High School. I guess it's safe to say what you got out of Sandia prepared you for what's coming at Highland.
I don't know how to answer that question, but maybe not. Basically, at Sandia High School, I had been there for 5 years. I decided that the head job opened it up, and I wanted to be the head baseball job at Sandia High School. Well, that was fine and dandy, and everybody thought I was going to get the job, but I didn't get it. I was very disappointed, and I was hurt. So I was no longer a coach for baseball at Sandia. Steve Roselle, who was the head baseball coach at Highland, called me up and said, hey, I heard you're thinking of not coaching anymore because you didn't get the head job over there. I'd like for you to come over to Highland. So I went over to Highland for a year. Steve Roselle was great, awesome. I got to work with the baseball players at Highland. At that time, they did not have a lot of talent. It was a real eye-opener for me. It probably taught me more about coaching than maybe any other program. And while there, it happened to be a year later that Coach McAfee resigned at the last second, 3 weeks before the season started at Pius. I put in for the job. They called me up for an interview, called me back that afternoon. I was at Sandia. Me and Steve Galley were sitting there in his classroom. They offered me the job. I accepted it. And right after I accepted it, I was scared as heck. I'm like, boy, you always wanted this, but now I hope you could do it. And I started doubting myself right away. And but I was excited as heck. So I got offered the head job at St. Pius. So in 1990, walked into St. Pius. Great situation. Awesome kids, awesome parents. The administration was so-so, but it was okay. My kids and my parents were just overwhelmed me how great they were. And I still in touch with a lot of my Sandia kids, a lot of my Pius kids. I still keep in touch with, even some of my Highland kids. I keep in touch with all of them. And then Rio Rancho High School was going to open up 1990, and I've always lived in Rio Rancho. Even when I taught at Sandia, coached at Sandia, Highland, Pius, my residence was in Rio Rancho. So when this job opened up, I came in, interviewed with Gary Veem, and not sure why, how, or they hired me, but they did. Maybe I was the only candidate, I don't know. But might have got lucky there. But it's my dream job, and I love being here.
You know, Coach, you and I talked before we came on air. One of the things, you know, we don't talk about is the success you've had, because you've had monster success here at Rio Rancho. But you and I were talking about something more important. You know, we have a couple of minutes left, and that is your relationship with your athletes. And I want to talk about this first. You know, the relationship that you have with your athletes. You know, how you want them to become better citizens, better people when they leave here. And that's very important to you as a coach.
You know what? When you start out as a coach, it's all about the wins and losses. You're young and dumb, and that's just the way it starts out. You think it's about you, and you think it's about wins and losses. And I learned, you know, halfway through my career that there's a lot more to coaching than wins and losses. And I do. I love my players. I tell my players I love them. I love them to death. It don't mean I'm not going to discipline you. I'm not going to jump on you. And I'm hard on them, especially in the classroom, but I love them to death. And they know I love them to death. And I feel like I have a great relationship with my players. I want them to be successful outside of baseball. Everything they do, community service, everywhere they go.
Right.
Nothing gets me more excited than kids coming back and saying thank you, or coming back and showing me, meeting their kids and their families and all that. And I've been more blessed to coach here at Rio Rancho High School around these kids than they've been blessed to have me, believe me.
You know, Coach, probably one of the last questions we have. Right behind us are 3 jerseys. Those jerseys represent something more than what they say. Rams, you go outside your office, there's the blue line. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, the blue line is respect to our policemen from all over the country. I want our kids to know, you know, how grateful we are, and let the police know that every time they come in this place that we respect them and we thank them for all they do. And a lot of my players my former players are policemen. And one of them is Anthony Haas, who died on the job here in Rio Rancho High School, was one of the best players ever to come out of Rio Rancho High School. And his jersey is one of those hanging up there. And then one of our players, Sal Puentes, had passed away before Anthony, and his jersey is up there. And, you know, before every game, I touch both of their jerseys before I take the field. And then I acknowledge the picture behind me on the left of Coach Ray Chavez, who passed away years ago. And those 3 people mean a lot in my life every day. And I want our kids to know about them too. We talk about them all the time. You know, our kids weren't around for Sal Puentes and Anthony Haas, but they know the stories. And they know about how important they are. And they've met the families. And they know the families of those people. And they will always be Rio Rancho Rams, whether they're here physically or we think about them in heaven. They're always with us.
Last question, Coach, really quick. You know, you've had a great career here at Rio Rancho High School, state championships, whatnot. But what is it you want your athletes to take when they leave the Rio Rancho baseball program?
What I really want my athletes to take is I want them to realize that there is a lot more out there instead of baseball. Baseball is not, you know, the end. You know, I want them to go out there and be good citizens, good fathers, community members. I want them to be good coaches, role models, mentors, and I want them to come back someday and just feel like they're wanted here at Rio Rancho High School. And when they walk through this building, whether I'm here or not, or this facility, or this high school, I want them to have good memories, to look back and say, man, I really loved my time at Rio Rancho High School. And if they could say all that, then I feel pretty good.
Coach, thank you for being on the show, man. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
That's going to do it for another edition of Tripp's Corner here on Proview Networks. Join us again next week as we follow the path of another exciting guest on Tripp's Corner.